Добрый день, уважаемые члены Диссертационного совета, уважаемые коллеги, гости. Мы начинаем защиту диссертации Майорова Арсения Валерьевича на соискание ученой степени кандидата политических наук по специальности 23-0002. Тема диссертации – особенности региональной инновационной политики Российской Федерации на примере Санкт-Петербурга и Ленинградской области. Кворум у нас есть, все члены диссертационного совета присутствуют, поэтому позвольте заседание диссертационного совета считать открытым. Приказом Санкт-Петербургского государственного университета председателем диссертационного совета назначен я, Сморгунов Леонид Владимирович, доктор философских наук, профессор. Разрешите представить членов диссертационного совета. Курочкин Александр Вячеславович, доктор политических наук, доцент, профессор кафедры российской политики, исполняющий обязанности декана факультета политологии Санкт-Петербургского университета. Грибанова Галина Исаковна, доктор социологических наук, профессор, исполняющий обязанности заведующего кафедрой международных политических процессов Санкт-Петербургского университета. Кузнецов Игорь Иванович, доктор политических наук, доцент, профессор кафедры истории и теории политики МГУ имени Москва.
Vatil Viktor Nikolaevich, Doctor of Political Science, Professor, Head of Department of Political Science of Grodno State University, named after Yanka Kupalo. I would like to stress a few formal points that are important for this Dissertation Council. According to the federal law dated 23/08/1996 on science and state scientific and technical policy, number 127, St. Petersburg State University is entitled to granting its own degrees at St. Petersburg State University. And this university acted following that law on the 1st of September 2016. Number of the act is 6821/1. If no fewer than 2/3 of the Dissertation Council members are present, the quorum is there, and the session, the Dissertation Council, can officially start its work. I would like to emphasize that we have a protocol of work of this session, and I would like to mention the order of things. First is a short overview of the chairman of all the documents presented by the applicant for the degree of candidate of sciences. Then a short review, presentation by the applicant for 15 minutes, and also questions to the applicant based on his paper presentation, and then also reviews of members of the Dissertation Council, and also presentations from the floor of all the members of the Dissertation Council, about 10 minutes for each speaker, and would like to, of course, the reviews should have comments, should focus on the strength of the dissertation, but also comments and critiques. And answers of the applicant to all questions of the members of the Dissertation Council that we've heard here. And also after the answers, a question and answer session, the floor is open, and anyone who is present here. But I would like to register those who are present here, and if you want to comment, make a comment, or ask a question, please introduce yourself, what institution you represent, etc. And of course, then the next point is final answers of the applicant to the questions that he has received from the floor, and then the presentation of the academic advisor of the applicant for about 3 minutes. And after the academic advisor's presentation, then we make a break in the session in order to consult, and we terminate our broadcast, and for 15 minutes we discuss the verdict, and after we reach a decision, then we resume the broadcast, and again there will be an open voting that will, determine whether the degree is granted. And after the voting, this verdict is then announced, and after that, we approve the concluding remarks, the resolution of the Dissertation Council, and after that we have the final presentation of the applicant, again that has to do with the defense and anything that he wants to say. And now I would like to mention all the documents that have been submitted. Dissertation of Mayorov Arseny Viktorovich for political sciences degree, and then it has been accepted by the Academic Council of St. Petersburg State University, dated 23/06/2017. So the applicant presented the following documents: the application addressed to the rector of the St. Petersburg State University, Mr. Korpachev, and also the list of publications, and including 3 publications that have been published in the registered journals, and also then the certificate that all the exams during the academic study for the degree have been passed with excellent degrees, and then the diploma of the Bachelor of Management that will be issued to Mr. Mayorov, and also a degree of the Master of Politology, also issued to Mr. Mayorov. The dissertation has been completed according to the standards of St. Petersburg State University, and everything here meets the standards of the Dissertation Council. Do you have any questions to the chairman of the council from the floor, from all those present, about what I've just said? No. Now I would like to give the floor to Arseny Viktorovich for your presentation. Dear members of the Dissertation Council, dear colleagues, my name is Arseny Mayorov. I'd like to present the results of my dissertation on the innovation peculiarities of regional innovation policy in the Russian Federation, case study of St. Petersburg and Leningrad region. Academic advisor of my work was Professor Doctor of Economic Sciences Stanislav Germanovich Yermenov. The political and economic system of the Russian Federation is in a transitional stage of development, and there's a danger of absolute dependence of natural resources and associated inertial development of the country. Therefore, the state began searching for alternative resources and alternative policies. This search led to the conclusion that there's a need for innovation development, technical and technological modernization of the political and economic system. Given the growing involvement of Russia in international integration processes, it should be noted that the basis for successful positioning of Russia lies in the construction of such an innovative system that would meet world standards and trends. Thus, international experience experience has shown that the development of an inventive system requires the development of a reliable, effective institutional environment and the creation of an innovative infrastructure. And so the innovation trends are very important. And the modern state, of course, has to communicate with innovation institutions. International experience has shown the development of innovative system and that requires an innovational institutional environment. The importance of innovative development is stated in the foreign policy concept of the Russian Federation. That has been improved by the President of the Russian Federation. And of course, this is a driving force of the economic development of Russia. Effective the importance of innovative development also is mentioned in other documents of the Russian Federation, and as I mentioned, the foreign policy concepts dated November 30th, 2016. We see that the political leadership of our country sees that the innovation institutions are important not for the domestic development but for international development as well. It's important that the concept of innovation development, unfortunately, is posited as unlimited development but my concept is based on the goals of the objectives of the study. We search for the goals of the Russian Federation policy in the international arena. We formulated the objectives of this dissertation. Is the modern innovative policy of the Russian Federation and the combination of mechanism at the regional level and international level, and especially focusing on the regional level. I would like to point out slide number 4. The regional level, especially at St. Petersburg and Leningrad region, there's legislation that addresses this issue that is based on the national legislation. And so the goals of this goal of this research is to identify the regional policy in innovation and the correlation with the innovation policy at the national level. Identify the peculiarity of the structural model of the regional innovation policy, and then identify the instruments of regional policy, and identify the peculiarity of Leningrad region innovative policy, and also St. Petersburg innovation policy, and finally focus on a special project that has been implemented in St. Petersburg and Leningrad region. Of course, we draw our results on the theories that have been developed by both national and international scholars. And we use the general system of systems and strategic development, and also systemic and strategic analysis. And so the problems of this innovation policy and the main instruments of depend on the economic context, of course, and this system has been developed quite thoroughly by international and Russian scholars, but I would like to contribute to this. Please look at this slide. Such scholars contribute to this concept. Different Galbraith and other scholars contributed. Drucker, Smorgonov, and Inozemtsev, Medinsky, and Prigozhin, and others. And the local innovation systems are covered by Nelson, Longbaum from the point of economic theory, and but the overview of the innovation policy of the Russian Federation has a fragmented character, and would like to point out such scholars as Freeman and others. I would like to point out the next slide. As far as the regions are concerned, and the studies that concerned particular regions, you can see such scholars as Mr. Afanasyev, Balabanov, Bryan, Valdaitseva, etc. And also the prognostic the studies of innovation process, and I followed research of St. Petersburg Management School, and especially Dr. Modgrenov, who's present here. And would like to talk about. I would like to talk about the innovation mechanisms within this region. The regional level should become the driver of the overall national innovation development of Russia, and the criteria of effectiveness of this innovation policy, unfortunately, is presented more by quantitative rather than qualitative criteria and studies. So I would like to fill this void, and I would like to compare the global environment and local environment. We used statistics, national statistics, and also statistics of the United States and European Union. The statistical data from Russian regions, federal agencies, innovation programs, and also the index of innovation development of different Russian regions, and the rating of Russian regions in terms of innovation, and also investment confidence index in innovation imperative in manufacturing, and University Business Incubators Index. And we also used the international rating system that is used by the BRICS countries. And when we developed a concept of innovation development, of innovation environment, we looked at the Imperial Ring. Imperial Ring is a project that was developed in 2015 that was created according to the degree of the Russian President of the Russian Federation. And so the Russian Federation President gave instructions to the local authorities, and the numbers are also mentioned in the dissertation. And also this project was then discussed at a round table in St. Petersburg within the International Economic Forum, and also headed by Mr. Kovalchuk, head of the Kurchatov Institute, and also the Mr. Belousov, who is responsible for the digital economy, has been included in the working group of this project, and so we have quite a spread of different scholars that we consulted when preparing our dissertation. I would like to talk about the relevance, the timeliness, the practical importance of the dissertation, and also the structure of the dissertation follows the following structure: the goals, the objectives, and I would like to mention the statements that I'm going to defend. First, the Russian economic system needs innovation development. It has to do not only by in the realm of industrial policy, but we also need to create the knowledge economy in the Russian Federation. Also, the state has the leading role in this process because it can facilitate a systemically different innovation process and trigger innovation process, and also form the conditions that innovations will be in demand in the market. But also, the potential of regions, innovation potential of regions depends on innovation infrastructure that is presented by the innovation technological centers or clusters. And the state should transfer its focus from supporting individual innovation companies to working with networks of innovation companies, and to this way to transfer to cluster approach in innovation development. And the criteria of effectiveness is represented by the quantitative measurements, but not qualitative methods. The criteria, the experience of the Imperial Ring will contribute to the overall innovation policy of the Russian Federation. First, we had to make an assessment of the innovation policy at the Russian Federation level, and the position of the Russian Federation at the international in the international arena. And we of course looked at the global innovation index. Russia is in third place out of 126, and so because we had because our study was an empirical study, we used a lot of the criteria that are represented in these indexes, including the Global Innovation Index, and also other indexes, because of course at the international level all these innovation indexes are very well spread. And so the concept of innovation policy was developed by Freeman, and it's were very well known, and also Nelson and Metcalfe. They developed this system between 1980s and 1990s. First, we analyzed the documents, and then we analyzed the documents that are presented in the legislation, in the initiatives of the President of the Russian Federation, and of course the President puts the target at 3% of the GDP to be spent on innovations and science. And the second objective was to identify the regional innovation policy. And I would like to draw your attention to slide 11. We think that we chose the definition for regional innovation policy as targeted innovation programs. To be brief, I would like to talk about individual regions. That's St. Petersburg and Leningrad region. This is the next slide. This is the Leningrad region, and this is the framework, the legislative framework that we used. First of all, we used regional legislation of Leningrad region. We identified the main issues that Leningrad region is facing at the moment. And also St. Petersburg, you can see here, Innovation Cities Index, that's again a rating system. That was developed by the Agency of Strategic Initiatives. And you see St. Petersburg is in 48th place out of 442 innovative cities of the world, which is quite high. And so the empirical part. The source of technological development of Russia is determined to the next technological paradigm and interdisciplinary approaches to innovation development. And so the main thing is to create growth points in industry and other economic centers, and of course based on the traditional growth points, and of course again we draw on the State of the Union address of the President of the Russian Federation, and the concept of the strategic development of Russia until 2020. And so the potential of Russia is determined by the human and economic capital of Russia, and of course this region, the human capital is congregated in St. Petersburg State University, where we are now, and other institutions of St. Petersburg and Leningrad region. So we see a lot of nanotechnology research and other research in other fields, and thanks to this, this region is a leader at the Russian level and international level. And also, we have a developed system of vocational education, and also a lot of research is done into this area. And so in St. Petersburg and Leningrad region are centers of intellectual potential, and I talk about it in the paragraph 3.1 and others. And now I would like to turn to the empirical study. The project is called Imperial Ring. Conclusions, please. Sorry. Conclusions. Today, the research showed, and the following practical results have been reached. The innovation system of Russia is determined by state policy, which is the pivotal agent of innovation policy. And state acts at different levels, regional and national. And innovation, modernization of the economy of the Russian Federation has to do not only with economic development but also with intellectual development, and choosing the right instruments determines the effectiveness of innovation policy in the Russian Federation. And one of the most important regional policies is cluster development in innovation policy. And the last thing is the innovation potential is depends directly on the social environment and the social cultural environment and the development of human potential and intellectual potential. And that means that this has to do with the state policy at all levels. And therefore, the author introduced a cultural dimension in the research and human research and human dimension in this research. Thank you very much. We heard the presentation from the applicant. Any questions? Any questions from the members of the Dissertation Council or anyone present? Irina Isakovna, please. Dear Arseny Valeryevich, the section of your dissertation that has to do with the imperial ring is very important, very interesting. Would you like to stress that if there are any political obstacles to implementing this project, and on the other hand, if this project is implemented, what political implications will it have? Would you like to answer every question, or would you like to answer questions as a combination? I would like to answer each question in turn. Thank you very much for your assessment and for your question. I would like to say that based on the legislation that is part of the infrastructure of the project, both as within the decree of the president and other guidelines and the regional legislation. And yeah, I think that as far as the infrastructure, there are no obstacles, no political obstacles. But on the other hand, and I put it in my dissertation, the things that have been included in some guidelines, and especially in the documentation of the project, do not necessarily correspond to the current federal legislation. And then the second thing is the funding, the resource base. The project has a large share of the federal budget, and needs a lot of funding from the federal government. So this may be a complication. Yes, Victor Nikolaevich, Arseny Valeryevich, you added some shades to the project Imperial Circle. Would you like to stress the socio-humanitarian dimension? Thank you for your question. Since we analyzed Leningrad region and St. Petersburg together, we see that St. Petersburg is surrounded by cultural objects, cultural sites, and very popular among tourists, especially international tourists. And of course, this presents a unique social-cultural layer. And of course, we thought of how to stimulate the visitors and increase the attractiveness of the site. And we talked about, for example, Gatchina and the physics center that is based in the vicinity of Gatchina, and we included that, and there's a great potential too. Arseny Valeryevich, I have a question that has to do with the national innovation system technoparks, technological parks, and you said that there's a lack of legislation that regulates technical parks. And so, what is your opinion? Thank you very much, Igor Ivanovich, for your question. I would like to highlight the following things. So, as part of this dissertation, we talk about a multifaceted and multifunctional approach to innovation development, and technological parks are part of this system, and of course they are targeted, and they usually are targeted at three or not more than three sectors, and there's the innovation project that they produce is not sold because there's a lack of commercialization mechanisms or how to sell the product. And the dissertation is trying to fill this void, and we're talking about the expansion of the legislative framework. And the technological parks, of course, are something that where we have the most empirical data, and this is one of the best examples of innovation policy implementation. Any other questions? I would like to ask my questions. The main idea of your dissertation is to transfer from a centralized command administrative system to a market innovative system. So what are the components of the market system apart from the structural innovative system that you could point out as the pivotal, the crucial parts of the innovation policy of the Russian Federation. And apart from the market system or market model, is there any other innovation systems or elements that we could use to implement or to increase the effectiveness of innovation policy? Thank you very much, Leonid Vladimirovich. I would like to answer your questions one by one. We have to we have to stress hubs, which is a sort of intermediary between the producer of innovation activity and the outside market. And I already talked about the commercial part of the innovative system, and this is a very important element of the innovation system. It is institutionalizing of this innovative field, this transfer from the the innovation process to the innovation product and to the sales. And the next thing I would like to say is that one of the classical variants, and Mr. Freeman pointed it out, there's a mixed system that has to do with that has both administrative elements and market elements, and the Chinese People's Republic, Deng Xiaoping's reforms are manifest that, and so the state is a great actor in the innovation system. On the other hand, there are points. There are points of making money, basically, and they converge this state policy and the private industry converge and free economic zones.
Okay, so now we proceed to the next point of the agenda. We have no external reviews, but the reports on behalf of all the members of the dissertation board have been submitted and are in compliance with all the requirements of the defense procedure in St. Petersburg State University. So may I now ask all the members of the dissertation board to perform on their reports, but please do not read all your reports out. Please be short, just make a short summary of your report. So please, the floor is yours, Professor. Thank you so much. Well, I have to admit that this paper is highly relevant. It is no doubt that it is relevant. And I would like to underscore that it is politically relevant, first and foremost, in terms of the national, the federal policy. There are lots of papers in this respect, but most of them are about economy, and they use a respective methodology. As for political sciences, those papers are lacking, and there is a huge demand for them because the innovation process implies a political solution first and foremost. The dissertation has a wide scope of advantages. Its contents is logical. As for the volume and the scope of the paper, well, that's sufficient. 147 pages without bibliography, which is more than enough. Over 100 sources have been used, which is more than enough as well, covering all the most advanced, most recent and relevant research papers in the respective area. So the defendant avoids splitting his paper into historical periods by focusing on the objective and the goals of the paper instead. As the chair said, well, may I focus on some issues for discussion, because those have the utmost importance for today's event. My first objection is that the conclusions of the first chapter are slightly too general or overgeneralized. Thus, on page 61, the defendant notes that one of the key conditions to ensure a breakthrough of Russian economy is a well-developed infrastructure that has to incorporate science parks. Well, an innovative infrastructure does not require any facts that would prove it. This is something acceptable overall across the entire hierarchy of power. As for science parks, as a key driver of advanced infrastructure, well, there is a broad scope of opinions because science parks are not considered apparently to be the most efficient tool to implement innovative policies. As for the political component, I believe that this should be worked through more thoroughly, because the dissertation stipulates not the politics, but the innovative activity. But this political component is missing, or should be minimal, in a number of scenarios. I should also note that the defendant has failed to mention the science and research strategy of Russian Federation signed by the President's decree in the end of 2016, identifying the priority dimensions for further technological development. The analysis of this strategy, at least a short one, could allow the defendant to disclose the very essence of innovative politics. So those are the main points of criticism that I would like to outline. However, this minor share of criticism does not invalidate the overall positive assessment of the dissertation. This dissertation is undoubtedly a huge contribution into science. Therefore, may I conclude that the dissertation characteristics of regional innovation policy of the Russian Federation in case of St. Petersburg and the Leningrad region, submitted in compliance of the Doctor of Political Sciences in the subject 230002, Political Institutions, Processes, Technologies, and Political Sciences, is in compliance with the relevant requirements stipulated under the dissertation defense procedure in St. Petersburg State University, whereas Arseny Mayorov deserves to be awarded the aspired degree. Professor Gribanova, please, the floor is yours. The previous speaker has already underscored the relevance of this topic. May I note that I was most interested in the regional aspect when I was reading this dissertation. We are very well sensitized to the fact that Russian Federation, a country as huge as that, with its ethnic, economic, cultural development, both in centers and regions, the innovation policy should be different. It has to be different. And in this respect, this attempt to shrink the scope to St. Petersburg and Leningrad region is very reasonable, because these two regions, these two areas, although there are close ties and close bonds between them, but nevertheless those are quite different. There's a huge discrepancy between them, which is amusing, exciting for us as politologists. This dissertation is highly innovative, which has been proved by the 2 days performance of the defendant, showing how analytical and how meticulous he is in his research. May I outline some drawbacks? Arseny is a young researcher who is just at the very beginning of his, I hope, highly promising career. Therefore, I wish that in his future research, Arseny would take note of everything that we are trying to point at, because a candidate degree is just the very start, not the tail of your scientific career. I think more attention should have been given to the correlation between national and political factors. I would like to see the defendant's opinion, the defendant's approach, original approach, on what steps should be undertaken to boost innovative activities across regions, and on what political power should the state, the government, rely on in this respect. Second, the theoretical relevance of the dissertation has not been formulated in the text of the paper. This could be explained by some desire to focus on the practical aspect only. There are many references and many sources in international languages and foreign languages, and I see that the author is well informed in what is the state of research abroad, globally. However, the papers, the books that cover Russia are beyond the scope. For example, the book by Lauren Graham, Can Russia Compete?, published by Massachusetts Technology Institute in 2013. The author has also failed to mention another paper that was performed by the Economic Cooperation Organization, fostering public-private partnership for innovation in Russia. Why am I so fussy about that? It is just because the defendant has been working on this dissertation for 10 years, and this paper, including this paper in your dissertation, would have been more than valuable. So I believe that in your future research, you will address these papers and find a lot of new sources for inspiration. There are some minor mishaps in the dissertation that kind of interfere with the perception. There is such a concept as the beauty, the aesthetic beauty of a research paper. This is both the form and the contents. And this is something that you have missed, actually. On page 22, 32, 33, there is a table. There are tables from 1 to 5 where there are reflected the BRICS. There is some information on innovations in BRICS countries and the economic cooperation countries. So why don't you refer to the South Africa when you cover BRICS countries? So I believe that if we'll start looking at innovations, India would be more indicative than Brazil, won't it? Because it exceeds, in terms of its GDP, Brazil by many folds. Bibliography is truly strange, with sources being arranged not in the alphabet order, but Russian sources and international sources being all mixed up. Therefore, it is very difficult to see what is missing and what is there. However, these minor points of criticism do not invalidate the overall positive impression of the paper. In this respect, the dissertation by Arseny Mayorov, Characteristics of Regional Innovation Policy of the Russian Federation, the case of St. Petersburg and Leningrad region, is in compliance with all the requirements for such papers stipulated under a relevant decree on the dissertation defense procedure in St. Petersburg State University, whereas Arseny Mayorov deserves to be rewarded with the aspired degree of the candidate of political sciences in the subject 230002, Political Institutions, Processes, Technologies, Political Sciences. And our next speaker, please, Professor. Distinguished colleagues, I would like to underscore the relevance of this research, but as soon as Professor Gribanova and Professor Kurochkin have already addressed this issue, so I will violate it. I will leave it back. However, I would like to point out that the very title of the dissertation sounds more than up to date. It's a top-notch research, a cutting-edge one. Arseny has made huge advances in the practical dimension. In July, the expert University of Social Research hosted a seminar in Arkhangelsk in the city of Petrozavodsk in the region of Karelia on how to establish a comfortable city climate. And there, Mr. Mayorov was expert on politics. This paper allows us to believe that this direction will be developing in the future. And as I saw at the seminar in the city of Petrozavodsk, there is some very specific stylistic, regional stylistic. And this is what I would like to address. The innovation regional policy here presents us with the best political landscape that would allow the regional economy to develop, that would tap the potential, the innovative potential of the society. So here, two regions are put together. Those are very similar, very close, but they're absolutely different. So the structure of the dissertation is quite traditional for this genre.
Сравнительная часть, которая отсылает нас к практике.
The comparative part is highly practical because it refers to both domestic and global processes in order to find solutions that have been already implemented globally and have proved their validity. This is true about rules and regulations, which refers to point 3. Unfortunately, there are some gaps, of course, because this doctrine allows some specific attention. It should include such components as the objectives and the structure of these objectives, what they are based on. In Chapter 3, we see the implementation of a whole scope of measures. And here, I cannot but mention the approach that is closely related to culture. And this is what was referred to at the seminar in the city of Petrozavodsk by politicians, by experts in geography, so on and so forth. As for some drawbacks, I'll be short here. The research on the Emperor's Ring project does not mention all the theoretical results. This is one of the drawbacks. Another drawback is that there is a lack of empirical data, especially in Chapter 3, provision 323334. So this is where we lack statistics. Some provisions, some paragraphs are disproportionate in size, and one of the drawbacks is the very choice of St. Petersburg and the Leningrad region. I'm very happy that the defendant is the patriot of his city, but you have to be very careful to these regions, in choosing such areas. Why St. Petersburg? Why the Leningrad region? It's not yet clear. Nevertheless, I should state that the dissertation is in compliance with all the requirements stipulated under the PhD defense procedure in St. Petersburg State University and deserves to be awarded the aspired academic degree in the subject 230002, Political Institutions, Processes, Technologies, Political Science. Thank you, Professor. The floor is yours. Well, thank you very much for the invitation. It is our first experience of having a PhD defense according to the innovative procedure. The day after tomorrow, we are having a Jubilee conference in Minsk. In the Higher Attestation Commission, I'm the ex-member of the Expert Advisory Board in the Higher Attestation Commission, and may I share my first impression. This is something what I'm grateful to you largely. This invitation opened up a new horizons for me. It disclosed new understanding of how regional discourse, how important regional discourse is. Yesterday, I had a chance to feel myself as part of this regional cluster. I visited Pushkin and the industry of tourism cluster. So what I felt is that in Pushkin especially, and in this region, this northwest region overall, we see this huge potential of this cluster, because I see so many tourists from China. And this means that they are highly excited about Russia. They are interested about Russia. They are passionate about this country. I don't know whether this cluster pattern will be proliferated, will be cost efficient, but, well, I see some first positive developments. And what I see in Mr. Mayorov's dissertation is that he's so passionate about what he is doing. He's a creator. He's being original, so you can see truly that it is an original dissertation. This is just the first go in research and an attempt to marry a dry, theoretical, economical approach to political thinking. No doubt. Here we can see ample explanation that allows me to state that the objective has been arrived at, the key goals and tasks have been solved, and thus emerging with highly exciting results. Those are the first results, but they're highly exciting. So, what do I have to add? I see that this concept includes regulations, rules, spaces, regional spaces, national spaces, institutions. Of course, there are some minor drawbacks that could be enhanced, but my message is that by leaving beyond the first institutions and all the stakeholders to those, I would like to refer to the political and legal norms. A lot in terms of investment depends on the emerging concepts, the emerging approaches. Second, this is the symbolic space. This is something that I'm truly emotional about. It's better to be real than to be ideal, so therefore a lot would depend on that. There is huge migration, so those who will be responsible for building up roadmaps, for establishing logistics, and thus using soft policies as a tool, and this is exactly the approach that the defendant is proposing, both in theory and in practice. So I believe that this would yield results. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Professor. Well, now may I share a couple of opinions here as well. This is a remarkable event because this is the first defense in the new format in the political science and processes, technologies and institutions. At the politology faculty that dates back to 2009, a specific trend has been established in terms of innovative policies. The former dean and now the rector of Leningrad Regional Pedagogical University, Professor Valeryevich, defended his doctoral thesis on national innovations and the schemes for national innovations. Our executive dean, Professor Kurachkin, also had a number of papers and books on the national innovation schemes. Therefore, I believe that this candidate dissertation is a follow-up to this tradition, thus extending our understanding on the Russia's innovation policy, both in terms of pan-national level and in terms of regions. Earlier, researchers were more focused on the structural aspect of innovation policies, whereas now it is the very contents, it is the mechanisms, the governance mechanisms that are behind these processes. And in this respect, I believe the dissertation possesses all the qualities that allow us to say that it is an integral, it is theoretically, empirically integral. It is also integral in terms of its approach to study contemporary Russia's innovation policies. Theoretically, it is important to focus on the significance of national and regional policies related to the government. The dissertation focuses on the role of the government. However, by that, a number of problems start to emerge. And I would mention them once I will proceed to some debatable issues in the dissertation. This dissertation, indeed, is an integral piece of research. And now I would like to outline some key conceptual issues. that are worth discussion. Of course, the dissertation is much broader. Nevertheless, I would like to voice the following. The idea that innovative policies and all structural components related to it are closely related to some global trends and global requirements to contemporary innovative policies. In this respect, the algorithm of innovative policy that has been proposed in the dissertation is more or less appropriate to combine the national, the regional, and the people's component in terms of resources and its potential.
Большое место в диссертации занимает вопрос о том, как трансформировать.
The dissertation also pays a lot of attention on the transformations of national and regional innovation systems. In this respect, the dissertation does not contradict the general trend of development of innovative policies on both levels. However, it is justified to focus on knowledge and expertise in this respect. This is a huge factor in implementing innovative policies, and therefore universities have their stake. Once we start speaking about regional systems and regional policies, we see that these networks of expertise, they establish the necessary innovation space. Those are universities. This space exists within universities. Third, one of the most logical and conceptual components of the dissertation is a comparative analysis of tools and institutions of innovative policies, and here the financial institutions, stimulating institutions, are deemed to be the drivers. What's more important, those act in combination with mass media, mass communications, development institutions sometimes, and sometimes political institutions. Not always, but sometimes. May I underscore with all due respect, as well as the innovative activity spaces. The dissertation is made ever more relevant thanks to a successful combination of theoretical, conceptual, and empirical approaches and analysis. This combination, together with methodology and so on and so forth, allows us to assume that this is a finalized piece of research indeed. Nevertheless, as any research would, as any high-quality research would, I cannot mute the suggestions. So, may I proceed to my suggestions and some aspects of criticism. I think that the author is not too consecutive, not too logical in solving the issues of the state and its role. The defendant does not include the government, the state, as into the composition of innovative systems. In some areas, the state is there as an external stimulator, as an external driver of innovation policies. However, the author deems that low risk is one of the objects of innovative policies. However, in innovation process, it's very difficult to distinguish between the object and the subject. Everyone participates, everyone makes a contribution. And it is not just being a driver of innovative development, but to be able to both drive and boost it to make it more energetic and intensive. So what state would be most adequate for innovation development? Well, I believe there could be two teams, an administrative team and a market team. Well, okay, and if the state, the government, is an indispensable component of innovative policies, then what type of governance should we choose? Where the management should be? What component of this governance is the dominating one? So in this respect, well, for example, innovation policy and political administrative reforms. So just administrative reforms. What is lacking in this dissertation? This is it. So that's the state. But what kind of a state? Where's the market? What do you mean by the state? Once we assume that we transform the existing situation into a market economy. Second,
на государственно-частном партнерстве как форме реализации инновационных.
The dissertation focuses on private-public partnership as a tool of innovation. On the one hand, PPPs means that without market, there is no innovation. On the other hand, this partnership highlights the role of political institutions as an important component of innovation policy. However, the defendant here is being too limited and won't think outside the box. Third, well, of course, there's a huge bulk of empirical data. The second part of the dissertation proves this fact. However, this empirical data is not a tool, it is not a foundation for analysis, but mere description. Fourth, this is just minor point of criticism, and I believe that in your mind, Arseny, you have already corrected it. This is the law on innovation activity. The defendant suggests to amend the law on innovation activities and thus include some extra components. But this has already been done in 2011. So what actually you are defending, this has already been implemented, right? You see, of course, I support this dissertation. I support the defendant, and I believe that Arseny Mayorov deserves to be awarded the aspired academic degree in subject 230002, Political Institutions, Processes, Technologies, Political Science. Now, please, Arseny, your responses to the reports. Distinguished colleagues, distinguished chair, thank you so much for your assessment, for your criticism. So each of your, all your feedback will be just the foundation for my future endeavors. Well, all of the statements are just and fair. I accept all of them. Unfortunately, indeed, I felt I was lacking experience as a scientist, as a researcher, to be able to describe actually what I wanted to express there. So I was looking for language. An important aspect of this work is the empirical project presented in this dissertation. Therefore, if we consider the convergence and the multidisciplinary features of today, I mean the huge impact of information technologies and some new trends, it is indeed highly challenging to come up with an integral description of all this landscape within a dissertation. I can state for sure that it was a pleasure for me to have these two books mentioned by Professor Gribanova, and I'm reading one of these books already, and I will refer to them in my future efforts. I'm highly grateful to Professor Kurochkin. In the bibliography, I included the doctoral thesis, and I believe that the descriptive aspects of the regulated institutions, I mean innovation activity institutions, those are there. So thank you so much, and I will be looking forward to comply with all your critical remarks. And I would particularly focus on what Professor Kuznetsov said. There is indeed a disproportion, and I apologize for that, because the discussion that has emerged today, I hope I will be able to come up with the universal tools to be more representative and clear and transparent in what I'm formulating. And it is a pleasure for me to see that I was able to focus on the absence of balance and the disproportion within the entities of the Russian Federation. However, because it is the regions that have the untapped potential that can promote the entire country. And unfortunately, I failed to formulate it clearly. Why St. Petersburg? Why the Leningrad region? Well, this is a unique cluster. Well, if we consider that St. Petersburg for a long time has been capital of Russia, so it is just the core, with a high concentration of historical sites. So this means that it may have a stimulating function. It may be the driver. So, as well as what I took into account is the amount of educational establishments, universities, and therefore I decided to choose these two areas for my research. I'm happy that Professor Vatil has been sensitized to the cultural determinant and this concept of it. I'm happy that you were able to see how versatile the landscape is on your own empirical experience. And this allows us to explore new horizons of innovative potential, thus establishing a unique innovative product. And lastly, once again, may I reiterate, Professor Smorgunov, I'm highly grateful to you for your attempt to conceptualize what we have been discussing in the work group within the project of the Emperor's Ring. It is indeed high time to move over to establishing some scientific results, to solidify it as a research. Indeed, I'm highly grateful to the Innovation School and the Public Governance School represented by you. I believe that these tools gave me an extensive methodological base to refer to. Now we are very close to our understanding of innovative policy, not from the point of view of object and subject. Now vice versa. There is a new approach emerging that I wanted to explain here. This is interaction with the landscape and landscape-relevant activities. The world is becoming more complicated, and therefore we are trying not to rule or to govern it, but to model it, so as to establish such conditions where actors, where people, subjects, yield the results they need themselves, or rather the results that us, as governors, would like them to yield. Thank you very much once for your attention and for your comments. Thank you. So now it is time for discussion. Now those who are present in the audience can discuss the dissertation. Is anyone among the members of the audience wishing to speak? Oh, no, the supervisor will have his time. So no one is wishing to speak, right? Thank you very much for presence. Now may I give the floor to the supervisor of the defendant, Doctor of Economic Sciences, Professor. Well, regrettably and happily, of course, rector of the Leningrad Regional Pedagogical, Leningrad Regional University by Pushkin. Well, I don't want to extend the time. What I would like to note that we have been working together with Arseny for quite a long time. And I would like to underscore that Arseny has graduated from various programs and trajectories of St. Petersburg State University. He's a bachelor at the management school. He's a master, and I was his research supervisor in the politology faculty, and largely and finally the postgraduate department in politology. So that took huge years, so many years. So a very comfortable relationship, very good relation, and hearty relationship has been established between us. On the one hand, I see a young researcher who has a good understanding of the objectives and the tasks, and on the other hand, we see an author who exposes the new trend in science. This is an attempt to obscure the limits, to think outside the box, and to expand our understanding. I'm highly grateful to Professor Vatel, our colleague from Belarus, for his commentary that we are trying to draw back into the political field what used to be there, but from looking at it at an innovative perspective. Another aspect that I would like to highlight is that the key provisions of the dissertation have been tested at various international and Russian conferences. What's more important, the author is a talented writer. He has produced 10 research papers in the relevant field. I believe that Arseny is a researcher who is ready to follow up into the tradition that has been established in the University School of Politology, and such a dimension as innovatics in this respect. Another advantage is an attempt to marry social, cultural, and administrative and economical factors. which is, as a mantra for us, the economy of knowledge and the real innovation processes in a country and a region. As for the subject of the research, well, this is justified by our understanding that today we witness how huge agglomerations are emerging in the Russian Federations, the agglomerations that are broader than administrative borders, that expand over administrative border. Thus, a new political and economical landscape is emerging. Such a regional product, I mean, it's not a product for an entity, it is a product for an entire region. We have the Moscow agglomeration, have St. Petersburg agglomeration, that includes a whole list of subjects, and those agglomerations are highly important. And, as Madam Gribanova noted, the analysis shows that there are differences in methods, in approaches, in political tools and solutions to current challenges. Altogether, this allows me to address the members of the Dissertation Board with a request to support Arseny Mayorov as a young, talented scientist and researcher. Today we have the best opportunity to recommend this ready-made dissertation to be awarded the aspired degree. Distinguished colleagues, we now proceed to the next point on the agenda of the Dissertation Board meeting. Please switch off the broadcasting, 5 minutes discussion, and then we will invite
Попрошу включить.
So please switch on the broadcasting. We resume the meeting of the Dissertation Board. We have open voting procedure now, as I mentioned in my introductory word, which means that every member of the Dissertation Board voices out his or her decision on whether pass or fail Professor Kurochkin, according to the results of our discussion, and the defense that left a very pleasant impression with me, because the paper is one thing, but the defense may either invalidate or make the paper even more worthy. So I believe that in this case, it was the validation of the dissertation paper. Therefore, my opinion is pass. The Professor Gribanova, I share the opinion of my colleague, and I'm in favor of awarding Mr. Mayorov with the inspired degree of Candidate of Sciences, Professor Kuznetsov. I would like to say, as the antique tradition says, Axios deserves it, I support it. Professor Yu, the dissertation is a finalized research, therefore I'm in favor of the defendant. Well, my opinion is of a chair. I'm in favor of the defendant. My decision is pass. My decision is positive. So Mr. Mayorov deserves to be awarded the inspired degree of the Candidate of Sciences. Distinguished members of the audience, distinguished members of the Dissertation Board. Out of the 5 members of the Dissertation Board, 5 were present at the meeting, and 5 members of the Dissertation Board have voted in favor of awarding Arseny Mayorov with the aspired degree of the Candidate of Political Sciences in the subject 230002, Political Institution Processes Technologies, Political Science. Our congratulations to our young candidate with his academic degree. There is one issue that we have to solve. We have to accept the resolution of the Dissertation Board. All the members of the Dissertation Board have this resolution. And the resolution states that the dissertation is in compliance with all the requirements stipulated under the PhD awarding procedure in St. Petersburg State Universities. So no objection. Let it be so decided. The conclusive remark by the defendant, a candidate of political sciences. Distinguished colleagues, first and foremost, may I extend my gratitude from the bottom of my heart for your time, for your effort to read thoroughly my dissertation that is the result of a very hard 4-year work done by me and my research supervisor. Thank you so much for your attention and for your time. Next, I would like also to say a huge thank you for the relevant and highly important remarks that extend my methodological understanding and perception of the issues that I have been looking into. I'm very happy that it did not have this formal, official format, but it was a discussion, a vivid, a vibrant discussion with the experts who I overall, who I have been heard of since the times when I was doing my master's degree. This is an enormous honor for me. Thank you so much for that. I'm also highly grateful to St. Petersburg State University for providing me with this unique opportunity to defend my dissertation in this unique, top-notch, cutting-edge format. Therefore, this is the best format to share the results of endeavors of young researchers who have something to say. I'm very happy to be among those. And it is, but for the university, but for my alma mater, an alma mater for my parents and for my grandparents, this would not have been possible. It is a great honor for me to follow into this trend, and naturally, I would like to extend my gratitude. I'm sorry for being so sentimental, because my respect is huge. I'm highly thankful and grateful to my research supervisor, Stanislav Germanovich Yeremeyev, because this convergence of economics, politology, and politics, this was the huge impetus provided by my research supervisor. Without him, I wouldn't have accomplished my dissertation. Thank you so much. I'm highly thankful to you. Distinguished members of the dissertation board and distinguished members of the audience, are there any comments on the procedure of the defense? I see no objections, or there are some. No, I see no objections, no comments. I extend my gratitude to members of the dissertation board, to members of the audience. The meeting of the dissertation board is adjourned. Please switch off the broadcasting. Thank you.